Hello and welcome to Belfast High History on YouTube. This little video is going to look at the Berlin Blockade and Airlift. It's from 1948 to 1949. It might take us in a bit of 1947 as well, but it'll cover this full period. So let's look at Germany first of all, because Germany itself was the cause of major increasing tension between East and West ever since the Potsdam Conference in June and July 1945. This is something the Allies, the previous Allies, the British, the Americans, and the Soviets, the Russians, had disagreed on fervently, and it was beginning to increase in tension as time went on. So Germany under Yalta and under Potsdam had been split into four zones after the war. You have the British zone, you have the French zone, you've got the American zone, and over in the east you have the Soviet zone. The city of Berlin, as you can see here, is actually 100 miles inside Soviet territory. This is to prove very important later on. However, it was also divided into four different zones itself in Berlin. So what are the causes of the Berlin blockade? Well, by 1947, tensions are really rising between these different powers within Germany and over the future in particular of Berlin. What had happened was the three western zones had actually merged their zones together into what was called Trizonia. It was originally Bizonia and then Trizonia, as Britain, America and France merged their zones together. It had its own government, and in 1947 it also established its own stable currency, the Deutschmark. And Deutschmark was really important in establishing major economic growth in West Germany from that point onwards. It was really clear to the Soviet leader Stalin that the West were aiming to build up Germany and Berlin. Because Stalin was absolutely furious with this. He wanted Germany to be economically destroyed. Germany had invaded the Soviet Union in 1941 and had caused immense amounts of damage. It had killed over 20 million people in the country, and Stalin had almost lost the war at one point. He was determined that Germany would be destroyed forever economically, and he had spent his time stripping East Germany of lots of assets following the end of the Second World War. He believed the West was actually trying to then rebuild Germany, trying to rebuild it as a threat to the USSR. He's a paranoid dictator, and he believes that they're trying to re-establish Germany as a threat to the USSR. He's also worried that a strong Western capitalist Germany on his own doorstep, on the doorstep of the East, could be a really big embarrassment to those who are living in East Berlin, for example. The USSR were also not consulted about Trizonia or the Deutschmark, and they were legally supposed to be consulted about these, and it made a paranoid dictator like Stalin even more paranoid. So Berlin would actually then prove to be the first real flashpoint of this Cold War. In June 1948, Stalin had decided he had had enough. He ordered all canal, road and rail links to western Berlin to be blocked. He said this was due to technical difficulties. Stalin hated having the Western powers having some form of control in Berlin so far within his Soviet zone. He wanted to force them out of the city altogether, and he knew the city was a western island in a Soviet sea. He believed it could be slowly strangled, almost like a medieval siege, and that the West would be unable to keep the 2 million citizens in that western zone supplied. So he's taken a gamble. Well, the West are not prepared to see that gamble pay off. They are confronted with a grave situation by the blockade. President Truman, the American president, he was advised by some of his military that, look, there's no point in trying to defend Berlin. We cannot keep West Berlin supplied, and they wanted to have it surrendered. However, for Truman, this was the first real test of his containment policy, to be able to contain communism where it was. If Berlin was to fall, he felt, well, next could be West Germany, and then who knows what after. So Berlin, in his opinion, had to be held. So what was the airlift? Well, while Stalin had sealed off all road, canal and rail links, air corridors to West Berlin were actually kept open. And the British Royal Air Force had suggested that with the right support and a monumental effort, the combined air forces of the West could actually possibly keep West Berlin supplied. They had tried this during World War II in various aspects, and it proved that it could work. And against all the odds, for 318 days, Western air forces flew non-stop, landing in West Berlin every 3 minutes. And this would actually keep West Berlin completely supplied and keep the country running. Airports like Tegel and Tempelhof were repurposed to handle huge volumes of goods and turn around a plane in only 30 minutes, which is quite unheard of. And Berliners endured. They survived on minimal rations, even digging up the Tiergarten in Berlin and using it for food and for fuel. Stalin was furious, but he couldn't actually intervene. His pilots could buzz, they could scare tired Western pilots, but they couldn't shoot them down, as shooting down a Western plane risked a nuclear confrontation with the West. 78 pilots would die in this airlift. That was due to tiredness, accidents, bad weather. However, against all the odds, a city of 2 million citizens was kept supplied, and by 1949, 8,000 tonnes a day were being supplied to the city. In May 1949, Stalin ended the blockade. He effectively had admitted defeat. The airlift had worked. Stalin was deeply embarrassed. However, the blockade and airlift actually had a number of important consequences. The airlift worked against all the odds. Old enemies, the British and the Americans and the Germans, put old wartime differences aside to overcome the challenge of the blockade. Truman had proved containment had worked. The West had stopped communism from spreading. NATO was set up, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a Western military alliance set up on the basis of an attack on one is an attack on all. And Germany was sadly to be permanently divided at this point. Following all the tension of the blockade and airlift, you have the German Democratic Republic, the GDR, which is communist East Germany. There's nothing democratic about it. And you have the Federal Republic of Germany, the democratic and capitalist West Germany. And this would remain a feature well up to 1990. Thanks for watching.